H&M, a brand we all are familiar with, from fashion shows, influencers, and movie stars. H&M has cracked the code of delivering trendy designs at affordable price in record time. But how did a single store in Ventura, Sweden transform into a fashion giant with 4,000 plus stores in 80 plus countries with more than 100,000 employees? In this video, we will find out how a salesman's trip to USA pioneered a revolution in the fashion industry and what are the business lessons that we need to learn from this extraordinary company. Let's make sense together. Year 1947. A long and tiring world war has ended, leaving millions dead, thousands injured, and economies in distress. The allied powers of USA and UK have triumphed over Nazi Germany. Many new countries like India, Pakistan, and Israel have emerged in the world's map, putting to rest to the global colonial dominance of Europeans. And a new era of globalization and stability is speaking through the cracks of darkness. During the same time, a salesman named Erling Pearson from Ventura, Sweden is planning his maiden business trip to USA. Little did he know that this trip would not just transform his life but the lives of millions of people around the world. After Mr. Pearson's visit to USA, he was so deeply inspired by the fashion retailers in the streets of New York that on his return, Mr. Pearson opened a new women's wear store in his hometown Ventura, Sweden, and named it Hennes, that is Swedish for hers. Hennes did fairly well in the upcoming decades and opened multiple stores across Sweden. This is the time when Mr. Pearson identified the growing demand of men's and children's apparel in his stores. Hence, to capitalize on this opportunity, he acquired a Stockholm-based hunting apparel and fishing equipment retailer, Moritz Whitfrost, which led to the creation of Hennes and Moritz, which we currently know as H&M. With this acquisition, H&M had the entire family's fashion needs covered under one roof. This acquisition started the global expansion of H&M from a single store in 1947 to 4,319 stores in 2024. But wait, how did H&M gain success in such a small span of time, especially in a post-World War era where economies and nations were torn apart in Europe itself? What did Mr. Erling Pearson do differently to surpass its competition? And what are the lessons learned by Mr. Pearson, who still drives H&M to be the behemoth of fashion that it is today? Primarily, there are three reasons that has led to H&M's success over the past decades. Firstly, consumerism. Although there are many definitions of this term, but consumerism at its core is a social and economic order in which the aspirations of many individuals include the acquisition of goods and services beyond those necessary for survival. To better understand this concept, let's take the case of Jatin, who is a software developer at Microsoft and earns a salary of 1.5 lakhs per month. With this kind of salary, Jatin has all his basic necessities covered. But what's interesting to note is that every time a new iPhone is launched in the market, he ends up buying it invariably. Now, a newly launched iPhone is not a necessity for Jatin's survival, but he still ends up buying it every single time. This aspirational compulsion of Jatin is what has been defined as consumerism. Consumerism is said to be beneficial for an economy because of its cyclical nature, where increased consumption, that is, when individuals purchase more goods and services, it generates better cash flows and profits for corporations. Since the companies make more money, it leads to increase in salaries and disposable income of employees and individuals. The government taxes both the companies and individuals for all transaction and income generated, which culminates in better tax collection and contributes in uplifting the country's economy. From a surface level, consumerism paints a very rosy picture, but what we often fail to understand is that the overexploitation of this wheel of cash exchanges might end up breaking the wheel itself, creating irreversible repercussions like resource depletion, pollution, climate change, debt crisis, and social inequality. In order to put ourselves in the shoes of Mr. Erling Pearson, Let me take you to December 2020.
China has identified the cause of the
mysterious new virus.
Coronavirus.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Stay at home.
We're asking everyone to work at home if possible, postpone unnecessary travel.
आज रात 12 बजे से संपूर्ण देश में
During COVID, all of us were stuck in our houses and the avenues of spending were constrained because of limited avenues of expenditure and a speculation of keeping disposable funds intact for any health emergencies. Hence, as soon as the lockdown was removed, there was a sudden increase of expenditure by households for all consumer goods and services like travel, apparel, jewelry, etc. Similarly, post-World War II, a similar situation occurred when people, after years of torment caused by the war, were finally able to spend on things that they aspire to have and not just the things that they require to survive the war. Mr. Pearson, during his trip to New York, being at the right place at the right time, had experienced the revived spirit of aspirational purchases, that is, revival of consumerism, which propelled H&M's initial success. Now, coming to the second reason behind H&M's success, instrument of status. Mr. Erling Pearson understood that all human beings, depending on whichever age group they belong to, put in extra money and efforts onto something called the instrument of status. For example, there are many cases of top-of-the-class IIT-IIM graduates who are leading a very successful and accomplished life, but still put in extra effort, time and money into becoming an IAS officer, primarily to seek social stature. Even as kids, we all wanted Sachin's MRF bat just to elevate our status in our gully cricket circle. This instrument of status is also the reason behind people buying iPhones on EMI, just to create an illusion in their social circle that they are rich, accomplished and have finally arrived. So at every age, we have our own instruments of status, and just like that, Mr. Erling Pearson understood the most important instrument of status among women between the age of 20 to 34 were nothing but the clothes that they wore. Secondly, he also understood that along with these instruments of status, human beings also have critical parameters that defines the value of these status instruments. For example, nobody cared about the quality of wood that the MRF bat was made of. In fact, most of these bats were duplicate bats with only a MRF sticker, and we bought it only because Sachin played with it. So if you see, the parameter to judge the status instrument was never the quality or the utility value of the product. It was all about the intangible status associated with the sticker or an iPhone. And just like that, in clothing, women have two primary parameters that define their status in their social circle. And those parameters are variety and design. And the culmination of these parameters is what makes them great status instruments. For example, even if it's a Sabyasachi lehenga, if you wear it for 2 weddings, it kind of loses its value, right? And obviously, variety is useless if all the clothes are badly designed. And the most interesting point we noted over here is that just like nobody cared whether your MRF bat was original or duplicate, very few women cared about the quality of clothes as much as they cared about design and variety. So hardly a few people wanted a dress that would last for 10 years because they anyways wouldn't wear it frequently. And third and most importantly, he also found out that women were extremely fascinated by fashion icons, models and celebs like Big Six in 90s and Zendaya in recent times. But at the same time, the existing clothing stores never catered to these needs of the customers. They only had out-of-trend designs without much variety. And on the other hand, the designer clothing that actually caught up with these strengths, they were quite desirable and yet very expensive and inaccessible. So clearly, there was an unfulfilled demand in the market, and H&M leveraged instrument of status to fill that gap in the market. Coming to the third and perhaps the most important reason behind H&M's success, supply chain. In terms of number of stores around the world, H&M's competitors like Zara, Uniqlo and Gap have 2,221, 2,434 and 3,560 stores respectively, whereas H&M has 4,319 stores which is way more than any of its competitors. The reason behind H&M's such massive global presence is its lean and agile supply chain, where, unlike Zara, H&M does not manufacture its products in-house, rather outsources its production to more than 900 independent suppliers around the world, mainly in Europe and Asia, which are further overseen by 30 strategically located oversight offices. Out of the 900 odd suppliers, 40% of them are located in China, India, and Bangladesh. But what has ensured frugality of cost structures for fast fashion brands like H&M has also brought out the ugly reality of delivering trendy designs at affordable price in record time.
April 23, 2013, cracks have started showing in the walls of a building in Bangladesh called the Rana Plaza. The Rana Plaza was home to shops, a bank, and clothing sweatshops, where managers agreed to create clothing for dirt cheap at turnaround times that no one in America could ever dream of. These people are producing up to 20 shirts an hour while being paid as little as 3 cents a piece. That is 60 cents an hour. And the people who produce the clothes, they're mostly women and children who work over 12 hours a day. 170 million children are spending their days working in some of the worst conditions on the planet. They're verbally abused, not allowed to take breaks, forced to work even when they're tired, sick, or injured, all that for maybe $2 to $3 a day if they're lucky.
Needless to point out, these working conditions are pathetic, and H&M has initiated steps like ensuring trade union representation of workers in the factories and hired exclusive suppliers to better control and manage the wages and working conditions of these factory workers. But the question we really need to ask over here is whether the situation has improved on the ground, or are these efforts meager policies on paper? Now coming to the most awaited part of the video, what are the business lessons that we need to learn from the extraordinary story of H&M? There are 3 lessons that we can derive from H&M's journey. Firstly, seeking and acting on opportunity. As somebody who wants to start their own venture at any point in their lives, we definitely can learn from Mr. Erling Pearson's visit to USA. Now, Mr. Pearson was not the first and definitely not the last person to visit New York. But since he was intrinsically looking for opportunities, he was able to spot the consumer trend post-World War II, which propelled him to build a business out of it. Hence, we should always analyze macroeconomic trends in global markets to build for the future. Additionally, spotting trends and opportunity is not enough to start a successful business. What is rather more imperative is to take an idea, create an actionable business plan, and execute it flawlessly, similar to what Mr. Pearson did with his first store in Sweden. Secondly, as entrepreneurs, it is important to build local but think global. That is, one should always be mindful of creating a business model which can be replicated in other global markets as well, especially when their local markets get saturated after a point of time and the marginal expected growth rate is smaller than any other global market. This approach of building local and thinking global helps in building truly global companies which solve problems not just for a country or a market, but for the entire mankind. Thirdly, optimize for scale. H&M could have easily set up factories of their own to maintain better control and quality of their products like their competitors, but they wanted to scale rapidly and have a wider global reach. Hence, they optimized for production, which helped them save capital to invest in global expansion. Similarly, every business needs to be very careful with capital deployment while optimizing for scale to ensure phenomenal growth.